A Journey to the West. Now we are discussing His Holiness's first stop in the United States, Hawaii. He stayed in Hawaii for 4 days. Today's topic is a Mañjuśrī statue bestowed by Mañjuśrī. The first Mañjuśrī refers to His Holiness. That afternoon, this should be the 18th, after His Holiness transmitted the Bodhisattva vow, he was supposed to have a good rest to get over jet lag. The time difference between the US and here is quite significant, as mentioned before, but many local people arrived with the wish to meet His Holiness, hoping to receive his blessing. His Holiness also permitted this. Actually, when His Holiness went out, no matter who he met, as long as it wasn't rest time, it was still okay. Actually, meeting the Guru is very important because for some people just a single meeting, sometimes we might say it's the same whether you meet or not, but actually after some people meet great masters, they truly plant seeds of virtue and then start studying Buddhism. This is very meaningful. Especially Westerners, they all love to ask questions, many questions. Perhaps here on our side it's often about blessings, requesting blessings for wealth, requesting blessings for safety, requesting blessings for family harmony and so on. But they had all kinds of questions about His Holiness himself, questions about Larunga, questions about Tibetan areas, many questions I can clearly recall that a man asked His Holiness. During the Cultural Revolution, I have heard that you were meditating in a cave in Tibetan areas when Red Guards attempted to drag you away, but you suddenly made your body extremely large and heavy, both large and heavy, so they simply couldn't move you. They had no way. How did you do that? He asked this question, and then His Holiness, actually this isn't in the biography either, this may not be completely like that. It was just that His Holiness, those who didn't see him at the time, His Holiness's face appeared extremely swollen, things like that, but who knows? Perhaps there are other great masters who also tell stories about His Holiness because his stories are not only limited to what's in one biography, his situation. The people at that time were all different. His Holiness probably spoke about it on different occasions. At this time, His Holiness said, "That was only their perception. I was just playing with them." His Holiness also seemed to indirectly acknowledge it. "I was just playing games with them." This was their own perception. There's also someone, mainly Miguel Schwaber. He's still alive now. He's one zodiac cycle older than me. He's also born in the year of the tiger. He should be in his 70s now. He's a Westerner. He was our host at Nechung Dorje Drayang Ling. Actually, he still understands some Tibetan. Sometimes he would speak to His Holiness himself. But his Tibetan is Lhasa dialect. Sometimes His Holiness didn't understand it very well. He and his family, both of them, I heard they're still serving at Nechung Dorje Drayang Ling. He's also a very steady person. He would often, when His Holiness wasn't teaching, go find His Holiness to chat and ask all kinds of questions. At that time, it was also said that His Holiness demonstrated miraculous powers to him. Later, we felt this was quite rare. In 2017, I specifically sent someone there to interview him. At that time, I was originally going to the University of Hawaii and several other schools. Everything was already prepared there. But later I couldn't make it, and since I couldn't go, at that time I thought I'd just gradually write this. In 2017 I had someone else go and ask. When interviewing, it was like this. The interview was on October 20th. At that time he said this. I said to His Holiness, Miguel said, "How was your pilgrimage to Mount Wutai?" His Holiness said there were too many people that time on the way to Mount Wutai. Especially on the train at this time, people heard I was going to Mount Wutai. More and more people gathered on the train. The surrounding police were getting a bit nervous. This is true, not to mention the police. Even the central government was very nervous. At that time, from the State Administration for Religious Affairs, a vice director named Chen Lei led the team, and from our Ganzi prefecture, a president of the Buddhist Association, an old monk. They personally went to Mount Wutai. Then at the top of Phuntsok Temple, we began. Anyway, all kinds of interactions. There were many at that time, especially many people came at that time. Many people in Han regions indeed had no idea of Tibetan Buddhism. They just wanted to go on a pilgrimage with me. Originally, His Holiness would first visit these temples, but His Holiness said at that time I didn't want to go. I only wanted to do a retreat. Actually, it wasn't permitted either. We had no choice but to do a retreat. At that time, there was a requirement that many of our activities, except for reciting the aspiration of Samantabhadra, and the activities at Phuntsok Temple above, temporarily it wasn't convenient to hold them. So later, His Holiness said, "I'll do a retreat. You all do retreats too." We all suddenly disappeared into the mountains. We all went into the mountains to do retreats. Some of them returned. At that time, Miguel asked, "Did you meet Bodhisattva Mañjuśrī?" His Holiness said, "Of course I met Mañjuśrī when my retreat at Sudana Cave was about to end." His Holiness often mentioned this on different occasions, including in his spiritual songs. He already said it. So I knew that retreat must be very good. Miguel asked again, "Did you get anything from Mañjuśrī?" His Holiness said, "Yes." While replying, he gently raised his hand to the top of his head, a statue about this size. You can see in that photo he's indicating. He was being photographed at that time, photographed in 2017. He said a statue about this size appeared in his hand. He did not reach into any bag, he did not touch anywhere on the table. He only put his hand naturally touch the top of his head, and then from space he took out a Mañjuśrī statue like this. He saw it with his own eyes. That day, I don't think I was there, I have no recollection. Perhaps I wasn't there at the time. Actually, he himself now also says, often I was nearby, and now he also. At that time, many people don't remember. Later when asked, they didn't know. They said they didn't see you at that time, don't know. Many people said this, but Miguel, he remembers. He said at that time His Holiness personally from space took out a statue. Indeed, back in 1986, when His Holiness went to Guru Sacred Mountain, on top there he took out a statue. We saw it, but that one didn't disappear from his hand. Then he put it in his chest, wrapped it with a khata, wrapped it up himself. But this one from space, he took out a Mañjuśrī statue, and His Holiness gracefully handed it to me. I reached my hands to it. Then I touched the top of my head with it. Then my eyes were glued on that statue. He was very excited and thought, "This is so special and sublime. I am so fortunate to be holding a Mañjuśrī statue bestowed by Bodhisattva." Mañjuśrī, his attitude toward His Holiness is still like this. Now his view of His Holiness, he seems to truly regard him as Mañjuśrī. He said, "Mañjuśrī, holding Mañjuśrī." Perhaps it manifested through his own faith. That statue was extremely exquisite and gorgeous. It was quite a weight in the hand. It was not a hallucination at all. Normally, some lay people might like to say some things, claiming to see what they didn't see like that. But he said it was absolutely not a hallucination. Moreover, Westerners' character, they don't like to gossip. They particularly reject the notion of hallucinations. This person is also very rational. Then, after examining it for a few minutes, he returned it to His Holiness. At this time, the Mañjuśrī statue disappeared from His Holiness's hands. He saw it with his own eyes. Actually, this is very meaningful, so I also heard that he was like this at that time. Later, that day I specifically had them go find him. After searching, fortunately they found him. After finding him, I asked him to tell the true account, without exaggeration or embellishment, because when we actually put it into writing, any fabricated language, I don't want to put it in here. Even if it's praise for the Guru, I don't want to use fabricated language. When he saw this scene, he pondered, was this showing miraculous power to me? Before, when I was in retreat with many lamas, I also saw their manifestations of miraculous power. But His Holiness's miraculous power is a different story. It felt quite awesome. He was totally awed at that time. It might have something to do with his previous reincarnation. As Larab Lingpa, the great Turton, this is what he himself thinks. Such things. There aren't many chances to see now. I am so fortunate. These are his original words, translated. He feels he is especially fortunate. They said on the day of the interview, he's still very excited now. He can still remember many things from that time clearly. He remembers many other things clearly, including the checkpoint we went through before that incident because of the Champa. They kept waiting and waiting, not knowing what it was, continuously. Perhaps at that time we had no communication between inside and outside, not like now, making a phone call. I can't come out right now. They kept waiting and waiting until very late we finally came out. He wondered what had happened. The plane had already landed, and then they still couldn't come out. He still feels about these things now. Later, perhaps he still has some recollections, some thoughts. This is his process of recollection, then the content of His Holiness's afternoon teaching. This mainly is Introduction to the Great Perfection. This is the main title. When His Holiness was teaching, he mentioned that masters of Tibetan Buddhism practice bodhicitta and the Great Perfection, among which bodhicitta. In the morning, through transmitting the Bodhisattva vow, he had already taught everyone. As for the Great Perfection, originally on the second day, the 19th, he would teach and confer the empowerment and practical instructions on the peaceful Mañjuśrī. But before this, many people at Nechung Dorje Drayang Ling especially hoped, in order to help the audience gain understanding of the great perfection and cultivate faith in the great perfection, His Holiness that evening also taught some content. At that time, I remember it seemed to be added, any time an evening teaching, is this free or not? If it's added, it can be free. If it's not added. Generally, each teaching session is not free. At that time, His Holiness, you are the embodiment of the wisdom and power of all Buddhas, who graciously upholds countless wheels of mandalas and takes the appearance as a great sage in this world. You are the unparalleled Lotus King of the Supreme Vehicle. This is a homage verse to Guru Padmasambhava. Below, His Holiness that day began. The opening was like this. For anyone who embraces a religious tradition, whether a follower of other religions or a Buddhist, at times such as giving teachings, receiving teachings, and engaging in any practices, it is normally required to first praise and pay homage to their principal deity. Following this common practice, here I also first paid homage to my own principal deity, namely Guru Padmasambhava, and made the commitment to turn the wheel of Dharma for sentient beings that have karmic connections with me, as I mentioned earlier. According to the extraordinary tradition of Mahayana Buddhism, when giving teachings, receiving teachings, or engaging in practices of the sacred Dharma, it is indispensable to generate the supreme enlightened mind, bodhicitta. This is very crucial. Speaking of the attitude of listening to a Dharma teaching, you should tune the mind with the aspiration, I am listening to the Dharma in order to place all sentient beings in the state of Buddhahood. This is very important. When His Holiness first began, when he was teaching them, my feeling is like this. Originally, this is a kind of lecture. If we speak in Tibetan areas, it might not be like this, but when His Holiness taught them, it seemed as if he were indeed someone who had often been to the West. Their way of thinking was relatively easy for them to accept. So later, many, didn't we also mention before, His Holiness had never been to the West before. But with the mentality of Westerners, his way of transmitting the Dharma was quite compatible. It was quite special, if in Tibetan areas. Perhaps there would be many quotations from scriptures and reasoning, but for Westerners, on the one hand, they also more easily accept more common language. So when we organize this time, I think many of you, including people who don't particularly understand Buddhism, if you learn through this method, it should be very good. Then we must first generate bodhicitta. He didn't say something like, for the sake of all. Our way of speaking is not like this. Under this premise, listening to the Dharma is very important. So how can you gain the ability to place all sentient beings in the state of Buddhahood through listening? To this question, Buddha Śākyamuni also taught, the merit of meditating for 9 years is not as great as teaching or hearing the Dharma once. That is to say, even if we actually practice for 9 years, it is less beneficial than listening to the Dharma in front of a teacher and contemplating its meaning. For those who aim to be of benefit to sentient beings, listening to the Dharma is particularly necessary. I don't know if you feel this when reading. It seems that His Holiness's way of expression, usually in Tibetan areas, it's relatively more expansive or directly teaching some profound Dharma principles. But here it's more like chatting with us worldly people. But among it seems particularly suitable for what they can accept. Moreover, the Buddha also taught in the scriptures, in order to signify the commencement of a Dharma teaching, it is necessary to first sound the Dharma drum, blow the conch, and strike a Dharma gong. I don't know about us now, it seems like blowing the conch. At our academy, we basically blow the conch. Now it seems that on both the nuns' and monks' sides, isn't there a small room on top of the assembly hall where they strike the Dharma gong in the small room? Dong, 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 just like that. If anyone hears these sounds, even if it is an animal, a beast, or a bird, I teach at 6 o'clock, I teach at 7 o'clock. If I want to blow a conch, then this sound, whether it's crows, magpies, or whoever, if they hear it, it can still block the door to the lower realms. They will no longer take such a lowly rebirth, no longer being born with such an inferior form as now. Then it is needless to say that listening to the Dharma brings about inconceivable benefits. So on this point, His Holiness also taught like this in the West. I have also said many times before, all of you, whether in study groups or when teaching the Dharma, it's still good to blow the conch once. It's not that difficult. Through listening to the Dharma, you can dispel your own ignorance and foolishness. And when you encounter a wise person, listening is also the best gift. Actually, 2 wise people, one teaching and one listening. Isn't it mentioned at the beginning of the great commentary on the aspiration for Sukhavati? It says that when one listens and one teaches, this is the greatest merit 2 people can create. Through this, In this very life you will gain inconceivable benefits. Think about it again. The merit gained in future lifetimes is also very great. The sutras also say this, repeatedly making offerings to the meritorious field of the three jewels, for years practicing generosity to sentient beings in the lower realms is not as beneficial as listening to the Dharma only one single time. If we make many offerings to the three jewels, and for many years practice charity to beings in the lower realms, this also has certain merit, but it definitely cannot compare to the merit of listening to one teaching session. In addition, it is also said in Buddhist sutras, building all kinds of stupas and statues of Buddhas with 7 types of precious gems all over the world is not as good as hearing a 4-line stanza of the Mahayana teaching, such as refrain from all evil, practice all good, or the precious jewel of bodhicitta, and so on. Actually, if we use stupas, actually building stupas and statues has great merit. But sometimes, compared with listening to the Dharma, there is still a difference. So some of our Dharma friends listen to teachings from actual Dharma teachers or some recordings that Dharma teachers have given before, often teaching, often listening, every day listening to one teaching. Actually, this is very important. The merit is very great, and the significance is also extraordinary. It is also stated in many sutras that even if you make all sorts of material offerings and do all kinds of service every day to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas dwelling in the countless realms of the 10 directions, it could not produce the same great merit as to hear one 4-line stanza of the Mahayana teaching. So at that time, His Holiness quoted various scriptural sources to teach them about the merit of listening to the Dharma. Since listening to the Mahayana teaching has such great benefits, so everyone should listen with the good motivation. By the virtue of my listening to this Dharma, may all sentient beings be free from suffering and experience happiness. Such an attitude to listen to the Dharma, we also now should listen to the Dharma in this way, right? Next, let me explain this section. Next, when His Holiness is really going to teach the Great Perfection first, he tells them about the Great Perfection teaching. Actually, it is related to Buddha Śākyamuni's Dharma. What kind of Dharma am I going to teach today? Countless eons ago, our root teacher, the Lord of Great Compassion, the unsurpassable called Buddha Śākyamuni, when he was in his causal stage of training, saw in the entire world there was one called the Great Sage of Shakya, the Tathagata Shakya Thubchen. He offered the Tathagata a pair of boots and a Kashika parasol. There are also different accounts in various scriptures and 500 seashells. For the first time he generated, in order to benefit sentient beings, I shall henceforth follow the Bodhisattva path, the supreme bodhicitta. At that time Buddha Śākyamuni generated this aspiration before the great sage of Shakya afterward. He began the Bodhisattva training in a gradual way, generosity, discipline, patience, diligence and meditative concentration, and so on, to accomplish the accumulation of conceptual merit, as well as the non-conceptual wisdom of realizing the emptiness of self. Through these 2 types of accumulations, actually in the first countless eons, he was able to ascend to the path of accumulation and the path of unification. Then in the second countless eons, through the accumulation of more merit and deeper purification of obscurations, he gradually realized the first bhumi of extreme joy, all the way to the 7th, impure bhumi. Then in the third countless eons he attained the 8th bhumi, 9th bhumi and 10th bhumi, the 3 pure bhumis. At the end of the 10th bhumi he took birth in the Tushita heaven as a sage called the White Crown God. Then for the celestial beings of Tushita heaven the White Crown God turned the wheel of Dharma extensively for them. Then in the earth sheep year, there are different accounts of this too, but His Holiness's account, when we checked at that time, it was indeed very correct. In the midsummer, on the 15th day of the Ashada month, the 6th month, the 15th day of the Ashada month, in order to tame and liberate sentient beings in Jambudvipa from the Tushita heaven, he entered the human realm into the womb of Queen Mayadevi in Kapilavastu. After 10 full months, we say 9 months and 10 days, or often say 10 months of pregnancy. After 10 months in the Lumbini Grove, from the right side of Queen Mayadevi, he was born without causing her any pain. Before the age of 29, during the reign of King Shuddhodana, he remained in Kapilavastu. At the age of 29, driven by revulsion toward everything in samsara, in front of a stupa he shaved his royal hair and renounced. Then on the bank of the Nairanjana river, drinking only 1 drop of water and eating only 1 grain of rice every day, he went through 6 years of austerity. This was to set an example for future practitioners and let them understand that practicing the sacred Dharma requires perseverance and austerity. Thus he manifested this way. Actually, this passage from His Holiness, I'm thinking, yesterday we also gave a teaching related to Buddha's 12 deeds. So here basically, from birth to finally attaining Buddhahood and turning the Dharma wheel, all 12 deeds have been described with very skillful language. So if our Dharma friends are asked to teach like this in one breath and with translation in between, this is also very difficult. Later, in the late spring, on the 15th day of the 4th month, Saga Dawa, he attained perfect, complete and unsurpassable enlightenment at the Vajra seat in India. 49 days later, at Deer Park, he turned the first wheel of Dharma in which he taught the Four Noble Truths. Later, at Vulture Peak Mountain, he turned the second wheel of Dharma in which he taught the absence of characteristics. Then in Vaishali and various other places, the third turning on fully distinguishing the reality beyond a trace of doubt. Finally, at Kushinaga, in order to purify sentient beings' attachment toward permanence, he manifested the act of entering parinirvana. The entire life of the Buddha was complete. So here, before the teaching, there is such very simple language to describe Buddha Shakyamuni's 12 deeds. That was a brief history of the Buddha's appearance in this world, from the perspective of Sutrayana. Okay, today we'll stop here.
Bandara Banma Sodargye